Hi, I'm just introducing the course to you. Some of you were here. We did this similar course last year. And so now we were asked to repeat it, and we are. And what this is a little different than a lot of the courses that we have at the ILR. The intention, at least, is that it will be more of a real conversation, something interactive. It's not The speaker is not so much going to talk about the pieces of art as to engage us in thinking about them and what we get out of them. And that's sort of an approach which they're encouraging docents to use at the Horn. So that's sort of where we're going with it. So please, you do not have to be an art expert. All you have to be is a person who relates to things in the world, okay? And that's really all you have. I mean, just say what you want. That's fine. This first talk, Judy Shoaf is going to give, is the topic is inhabited worlds. And it's about looking at places where people live and how they react to them. And so I'm going to leave it up to her. I'm just going to stop there.
All right. Okay, welcome, and thank you for inviting us on behalf of the Harn Museum docents, as well as myself. This is a wonderful opportunity. Ready? Yeah. I call this talk Inhabited Worlds. You get a preview of some of the others. I was given this slide to start it off to remind you that we are representing the Harn Museum docents. But I think it's interesting to look at just as an image of a building. Art museums are very interesting buildings because they want to invite you in, but they want to put you into a particular frame of mind, right? So I think one of the interesting things about this particular photo, when I look at it, is that you can't really see how to get into the building, can you? Does it make you want to go into the building, want to find that entrance? You want to. Yeah. Yeah, the big painting. Yeah, that giant blown up painting, the actual painting is about this big and it's square, but that certainly is telling you it's promising treasure inside, isn't it? Does anybody not want to try to find the door?
From this angle. Oh. From this angle, the car is blocking the view. And actually, I was there just a week or so ago, and I don't know, I thought the car was interesting, but it didn't add anything to my visual pleasure in entering the museum, and I wonder why it's there.
That's an interesting question.
Maybe because there's no other place for it and somebody gave it to them and they want to display it. I mean,
Miss Judy, try and direct your voice there. Maybe I'll try this. I think the car is part of an exhibit, the exhibit of Cuban art. And of course, one thing that we know about Cuba, I think all of us, is that vintage cars are there because, and they maintain them because they can't get new cars. And this is, you can't really see it from this point of view, but it's a car with wings on the top. So it's very, very meaningful to the artist, Asterio Segura. He came and gave a talk just on this subject at the museum. The idea of getting into a car in Cuba and being able to fly away, which he as an artist can do. He can fly away and come back, but many Cubans, of course, cannot. So it's actually part of the same exhibit as the painting on the wall, but more current. But it's an interesting point that it's kind of like a dragon with wings challenging you as you come up to the museum. Yeah.
What is on top of the car?
Wings. A
Oh.
pair of small airplane wings, painted black to match the car.
Miss Ryan, if you want to come up, we're going to try and keep the mics
So
up
it's
in these
kind of
first
a
couple
flying
rows.
car. This wasn't what I was going to talk about, but I think it's interesting. That exhibit unfortunately has just closed, but I think you can still see the car out in front of the museum for a while.
And actually, the fact that I didn't know exactly what it meant says to me, I guess I better go inside because there are going to be some interesting, challenging things in here when it comes to thinking about art. So it entices me to go in.
Yes. And the fact that the museum with that weird pyramid on top and the different shapes of it is so, it's hard to grasp in a way. It's not like a four-square building. It does give you the feeling of a treasure house, that there are things inside that you will be able to see and learn, I think, that you didn't expect. So just even from this random picture, there's a lot to be understood about what a building can, in how the building can make us want to go in or discourage us from going in. This maybe, yeah, I see you smiling. I'm just going to go ahead to, this is by Jerry Olsman, who was a resident here, I believe, for a little while, or maybe a longer while. But he was a photographer who lived in Gainesville and taught at the university. But just looking at the picture, does this feel like an inhabited place? Not with those broken windows, huh? Yeah?
It's inhabited by spirits and memories
Spirits and memories. Yeah,
and history. The
and
roots.
history.
I think it's a fabulous photograph.
Yeah, you kind of get that feeling from the relationship between the tree, which obviously that's the roots of a very old, large tree, that the house has a comparable history, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, well, talking about the theme, I mean, first of all, I loved this exhibit. It was just
Yes.
fabulous, the way he did combination photographs without digital photography. And to me, this is, that really, this is how it happens. That house is built from trees. And so that's what's going on. It's
Yeah.
the tree transitioning into the house with the interface of man and their construction expertise and so on.
That's a wonderful view of it, that the tree becoming the house. And if it continues to become the house, maybe the house will become more obviously inviting and habitable. The other thing one could see is that, maybe you're going to say, yeah.
Dark clouds. And it just looks like a spooky, dreary day.
Yeah. It's a dark day, and that gives it a little bit of a gloomier feel. So it could be that the tree is repossessing the house. That's another way to see it. And that's kind of something that I wanted to look at in these various paintings that we're going to look at, the relationship between the human habitation and nature, and the sort of struggle between them.
We have one here.
The thing that is odd to me is the juxtaposition of the two scales. The tree trunk is maybe 3-4 feet across at the most versus a house that may be 40 feet across.
And we feel the tree as being that big, I think, rather than the house as being a toy house. It feels like a very large, old, well, to me, yeah.
Also, listening to all the comments, it's a very provocative picture because I see it so differently. A home is where you're safe and you put down roots. And I look at it and say, you can put down all the roots you want, but life is short and it's over for that particular place.
I think if Jerry Olsman was hovering in the in the room, if his spirit was here, he would be very happy with that comment. Because he particularly, he does not title his paintings, and he wants you to see all those possible interactions. The house, the tree becoming a house, the house being devoured by the tree, or the house being the place where you have roots as solid as a tree.
I've
Yes.
seen it, I'm sorry.
No,
Is it
go
okay?
for it.
I've seen the exhibit probably 6 or 8 times now, and each time it's something different to me. But since it's at the very beginning, it's become to me the roots of his photography. You know,
Yes, this picture is kind of the emblematic, the first thing you see when you go into the Olsman exhibit, which will just, I think it's just going to be at the museum for a few more weeks. But it's a wonderful exhibit.
But he didn't place the house in an uninhabited environment. If you look in the background of the house, there is a great deal of life going on. So that contrast must be meaningful to say that the house is not a completely isolated object.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and it gives the house more context, maybe, as more credibility as a place where people live. Well, I'm going to go on. The first thing I was going to look at is a couple of open air dwellings beyond the Olsman, which is sort of emblematic. And this is a landscape scroll. It's an ink painting with a little bit of color on silk, mounted on silk, and then you can see the dowel. So when it's not on exhibit, it can be rolled up and stored that way. And in fact, it was on exhibit, but it's not at the moment because these things are the colors are delicate, so they don't keep them on exhibit for a long time. Have you seen pictures like this before? Has anybody not seen a picture like this before? Yeah, it's a really common type of picture, isn't it? It's the tradition of pictures like this in China goes back at least 500 years, probably. Really, you can stretch it back considerably farther. And typically the painting is drawn from an imagined landscape rather than, it's not a matter of the painter going out into the wilderness the way some American painters did and painting the wild mountains. It's very, very conventional. This is how you paint the mountain. This is how you paint the tree. Don't forget to put a person in for scale, that kind of thing. What do you think of the way that people are positioned here?
Well, as in many scrolls, the people at the bottom seem to be starting on an adventure. To me, it looks as though they're just beginning to go to something higher there.
Yeah, the mountains imply some almost, something that's beyond the human that you can aspire to and climb to, maybe. What do you think of the little house, so to speak? Or would you consider it a house or a home? No. Yeah, it's very fragile looking, isn't it?
I think of it as like their front patio, although they would have a totally different word for it. And that the person on the bridge, and is that another person to the right? Okay, they were sitting on that patio. They were sitting there as their last contemplation before their great journey into the heights. And so they're just taking one last glance at their home because their building where they sleep and live is off to the right in my fantasy view.
I like that.
Yeah.
Another interpretation might be there is a little guy, that little blue blob in the little pavilion, and the other guy could be coming to visit him, but we don't see any path, and that bridge looks kind of hazy. It's hard to tell if it leads to a path whereby he could get to the other man, or if he's just on his way up. Yeah,
I take the person in the little house is praying.
that is a very, yeah, that's a good suggestion, I think, that he's communing with nature, kind of praying to nature. There is the scroll, as is very, 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 very common in this kind of work. The scroll has a poem, and the poem says, "Outside my hut's railing, mountain reflection in the water gleams. Spring flowers and autumn moon are in view. Why envy Wang Wei's villa when my humble hut is the best to me?" And Wang Wei was a Chinese poet of the 700s. He was also a painter, and he was considered to be one of the great inventors and innovators of poetry and depictions of these wild mountain landscapes. But the actual picture that we're looking at, this scroll, was painted in the early part of the 20th century, which I guess this is a great audience to say wasn't so long ago. If I've got third graders, there's a different feeling, but that you understand that this is the painter evidently, this is the way he imagines a humble hut, which as opposed to a villa, which is pretty strange because, as you said, it doesn't look like a hut at all. It doesn't look like a place you could live. It looks like the porch of a villa, or yeah, like the porch of a villa. I just wanted to bring this in. This is another item that we have on exhibit at the Harn. Currently, this jade boulder that was carved with an imperial inscription, and it's a good deal older than the scroll, but it represents that same tradition. You see the tree, the crags, the inscription. And I think that might be water pouring through the opening. There's like a gorge there. So you can compare it and you can see the little house there is part of that image, that part of this extremely wild and kind of untamed landscape is the suggestion that there are people there to look at it and to commune with the wildness of it. You see the little house. But I think, as you said, it doesn't really look like a place you could live. If you lived there, you would, even if you had screens to pull across to make walls, you couldn't live there for very long. If the river rose, you'd be in trouble. I guess that's a Floridian perspective, but here's another painting. Actually, could we dim the lights a little bit just to look at this? Because it's a wonderful painting. Have you seen this in the Harn? I see nods and I see heads shaking both. It's one of my favorites. It's not a huge painting, but it is good size. And does it feel like an exotic landscape like the other one? Like the Chinese, well, Korean painting of a Chinese landscape? Hmm?
It would seem exotic. It would seem exotic if you lived in Minnesota.
Right. Or New England and New York, like the painter there, who actually painted this. Yeah?
The reason we're doing the mics is so that the people on Zoom can
Yeah,
hear us.
just so,
The previous picture, it was more, the Oriental is more calming, soothing, pastels. This is, it grabs you and lots of color and so forth. So it's definitely a different culture, a different climate, different everything involved in it.
yeah, another difference is the difference between a Korean artist painting something in a Chinese tradition, where the elements are very well fixed. As we saw, you have water, you have mountains, you have human beings, versus this, which is an artist who is painting something he's never seen before, and he's looking at it in the Impressionist tradition. It's exotic to him, clearly, I think. He's trying to get everything down very fast. I think the other artist, actually, if I go back, if you look at him, he's trying to get everything down very fast too, but probably because he knows so well what he's painting. Whereas this artist is, yeah, did you?
Yes, thank you. Is it Ernest Lawson? Who is the painter?
Ernest Lawson, yes.
Okay.
I can go ahead to that slide. Ernest Lawson.
And yeah, his brush strokes was very thick, impasto almost, and maybe it is impasto, but does the Harn have anything else by Lawson that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of.
I was trying to remember whether this is typical of his brushstroke style.
I don't think so. I have looked him up a little bit. Usually he was kind of he was part of the Ashcan School in New York City, but he painted a lot of rural landscapes in New England rather than emphasizing painting New York streets and so on. And I think usually his things are more polished.
Yes,
Uh,
that's my recollection, but you probably know his work better than but it's very effective in conveying, as you said, the newness of the experience to him being in this part of the country.
Yeah, it feels like he's trying to get it down as fast as he can, because he hasn't seen it before and he probably won't see it again.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Perhaps Mr. Lawson, the artist, has a touch of psychic ability because it looks like he has George Harrison sitting in the stern of that boat.
Well, Irish, Seminole. um, yeah, it's an interesting, the way that man is looking straight at us is, or boy, is very striking, isn't it? It brings you, well, I guess it's a question, does it bring you into the painting or does it push you away from it? Is he painting these Seminoles as part of nature or as people who are exploiting nature, who own the nature in a way that he, even as a painter, can't? And this kind of fits back with that little guy in the pavilion and the poem. I own all of this because I'm sitting here looking at it. By contemplating it, I can become one with it. And I think there's a sense of distance and strangeness in the haste with which he paints and also in the figures. Now, I blew up this one figure because I think it's a woman because of the long skirt. The men are wearing trousers. And they each have a boat, and he has a boat, and she has a boat. But here's this little structure, a chickie. And I paired it with some pictures of chickies that have been more recently constructed in, I think it's in a state park, as a kind of a demonstration of what they are. These little open air houses on stilts that can accommodate the different flows of the river. Do you think that Lawson understood the structure of the chickie? Agnosticism. Yeah. It's not clear to me that either this wasn't on stilts or that he understood that it was on stilts. He was just painting very rapidly what he could see. But you can see that sort of spine on top that holds down the grass. He understood that. I'm sure he had been to Europe and seen paintings of thatched roofs, and he understood that. But I thought these were interesting images of kind of man in harmony with nature, living in a very open environment with just a roof over their heads. One of them from a tradition and the other, a tradition that was extremely well understood, and the other, somebody who'd never seen that before. Now I want to look at castles. And this is kind of a favorite picture of mine. You may have seen it at the museum. And you may wonder why I put it in among the castles. It's because it is a castle. But if you just looked at this design, what would you think of? Gators. I'm sure that's why it's in the collection. Oh, we could have the lights up
Oh, okay.
again. I think there was just that one picture that, yeah, it's orange and blue in a way that I think it's using the orange and blue the same way that the gators do as a bright, contrasting, fierce set of colors. Something that is not really natural, although we know that the sky is blue and the sun is orange, but but challenging, attention-getting, kind of heartwarming, maybe more to us than. What would you say it's a picture of?
Here, Ms. Francis.
In the front, it looks like the moat. That's, and then basic structure, and then the tower is that blue one with the points coming up.
The blue one with the points coming up? Yeah, it looks like crenellations, doesn't it? Like a crenellated tower. And I think you're right about the moat-like feel of this. If you look at it just as colors, you have the blue and orange. And then if you look at it as shapes, you have that kind of cube that's dominating it. And then this sort of wedge, but the wedge doesn't fit into the same three-dimensional space really as the cube. It's very hard to imagine that. You've got what look like three-dimensional objects, but they don't really make sense in three-dimensional space. It's hard to see how they're all connected, and yet there is that suggestion of a defensive rampart, a moat, and a keep. Any other? I really like this picture, so.
The brown swoop on the lower right makes me think of either a road or a river.
Yeah, a road, a river, and then somebody else said a moat. It could be a wall too. It's something defensive though, which a river or would be. A road would not be defensive, but then it ends in that complicated orange and blue and black area where you can't really get past it. So this is by an American painter from a very famous American family. And it's called Kenilworth Castle Aerial View, 1937. And I think the date is interesting because it's between the two wars, both of which, of course, well, the second of which particularly hurt England. So it's before that. This is what Kenilworth Castle looked like in its glory. And you can see there's a moat down there with swans, fishermen, people going to and fro. But notice how in this picture, the castle just organizes the whole landscape. It divides it into forest, into kind of geometrical shapes with the roads. You've got the square towers and the oval tower and another square tower, but that very straight road. And it sort of gives you a sense, I think, of safety. That, you know, the fishermen can fish and the guys in the boats can go out for pleasure because the castle is there. It's huge and it is rational. Does that make sense? Oh shoot. Yeah, this isn't the right the right copy. I actually found online I think the photograph that Gallatin worked from, and it's different from this. It's from the 1920s, and it shows the keep, and gosh, it's hard to, anyway. So I can't really talk about that. This is a recent photograph because the building is still in use. But that swoop that we weren't sure what it was is the wall that separates the castle grounds from the moat, and you can see that very clearly. And there's the big square keep, and then the thing that was identified as crenellations is actually a ruined tower that has the top part of a window is gone, so it's sticking up. But I can only tell you that because the picture isn't the same.
But I think that knowing that it's an aerial view makes it make sense to me, because if you were in 1937 as well, you know, airplanes are relatively new at the time, not, and taking photography from the air, but things are reduced to lowest terms and to basic shape. If you're looking at them stood at the top of the Empire State Building, you get that feeling looking down an automobile, for example. So I think it's critical in looking at this piece to know that it's an aerial view, and then it really opens it up as far as your contemplation of things seen from above. I think it's really good to know that.
One thing I found very striking about the picture, that one, is that this is not a castle in a high place. It's not on a hill. But when you look at Gallatin's version of it, the keep of the castle is actually above everything else. And when you look at the aerial view, you can also see it, that it's not on an elevation, but it is it is physically above. And I think you can get at something essential about the castle dominating the landscape that way. This one, it might be good to dim the light a little bit too. I remember I had trouble reading it when, yeah. This is another painting that's on exhibit at the museum, of a different castle and a different concept of a castle. It's certainly not orange and blue. It's realistic, kind of impressionistic or post-impressionistic. The castle dominates, but it dominates partly because it's up higher than anything else, and partly because of that long crenellated wall with the tower at the end that like seems to brood over the scene. I just wondered, does this look familiar to anybody? Yeah.
Castillo in St. Augustine.
Yeah.
I've been doing research on this painting, and there are two of them. The other one is at the Morse in Winter Park. And it's my belief that this is made from a photograph. We know the one in the Morse is because they have the photograph that he worked from. He was here in the early 1880s because his wife was ill, and he brought her to St. Augustine for 2 winters. She didn't really get better. She died in 1884. But he had become fascinated with photography. And this was about 5 years before the introduction of the roll film camera. And so he was having to use box cameras, and so he focused on architectural topics in St. Augustine. And in fact, there's one you can see in Governor's House right now of the Segee Kirby Smith house. And there's a photograph of it in, at the Morse. And so you can see how much he was influenced. I hope the Harn will try to find the photograph that I believe this came from. But Louis Comfort Tiffany spent a lot of the 1880s in St. Augustine because he later was hired by Flagler to be the interior designer of the Ponce de Leon Hotel. Anyway, this is a really interesting painting, I think, but I think there's a lot more to it that we don't know yet.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's great. Yeah, Laura?
Well, when I look at this one, what I'm really focus on is the sort of the question of what is it trying to say about that castle? I mean, it's old, it's gone, and the colors in this are all very dark colors, unlike the river scene that we saw before. So I guess it sort of, I'm trying to think, what was his point? What, did he have a point about this castle?
Well, just to support, I'm wondering also what's going on. What is the white thing? As a dog lover, I immediately thought that's a cute little white furry dog there in the front, but of course it isn't. That white blob that's in the center there, it looks like it's in that little small boat. What is that?
It's a figure. Actually, I went over to the Harn to get close to it when I was preparing the lecture I gave yesterday. And then I backed up and fell over the bench that's right in front of it. It took a while to recuperate, but interestingly, Ann Mitchell, who's a docent there, and a friend of mine, was about 10 feet away, and she had come over to try to help me figure out how many figures are in that painting, and we never could. It's a mystery to me.
Yeah, I see 4 figures, but maybe 5. There's at least one in the boat who seems to me masculine, and then the 3 women sort of huddled together, rather desolate looking, as if they're clinging together, and then a hint of a fire over there, which suggests it's a cold day. But I don't know what that white thing is. I think I thought it might be a some kind of stone that's there to tie the boat to or something like that, but it's hard to say. Oh yeah, you had something.
Well, I was just going to point out and wonder about those figures as well. Looking like in the circle 3 or 4, and then with a boat there, it feels like they've arrived for a purpose, and that's as far as I got. You know?
That's an interesting story. It certainly invites storytelling. To me, what I find kind of fascinating is the way the whole painting is dominated by the Castillo, and yet at the same time, the Castillo seems so irrelevant to the human drama. It's a past that is gone, that no longer functions. It's not protecting them. It's not frightening them. They have to keep living their probably rather impoverished lives without paying any attention to it.
Yet the dominance of the Castile makes the figures seemingly almost clutching each other. It makes them appear all the more vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And nature is sort of there, but it's very barren looking. You have those kind of dunes heaped up with a little greenery on them, but not much. And the beach and the water, which is brown. It's a very poetic image, but not not poetic in the lyrical, beautiful way, but kind of a scary way or sad way.
It looks like, I mean, trash washed ashore, all the little pieces of color and everything. It just looks like trash. And the people, I don't know, they look like you said, they're kind of bemoaning or something, that life is dull and tragic. And then after what we just heard about the artist was there because his wife was ill, does that kind of taint his idea? I mean, this is beautiful. You came to Florida for sunshine. And usually you think of blue skies, and although St. Augustine, I've been at the beach and it looked like that. But is maybe the artist kind of desperate feeling too and depressed because of his wife's illness?
That's, yeah, it could have a resonance like that for him, or that the darkness of worrying about her could have.
Once again, I have to be the contrast here. I've done a lot of boating. The water is very wild there. The fortress is a protection. I'd pull my boat in there and build a fire and have a picnic. I just have to point out how differently we see things.
Yeah.
The beauty of art.
And in that case, would the fort feel like a protection? Because that is a breakwater. Yeah.
Along the same lines, I was going to say the roiling water is going to overcome the whole thing. And in that way, it relates back to the Chinese view that nature prevails even over people. And we're faced with that a little bit today. But I feel as if the castle is deteriorated and is perishing, and eventually will lose the battle against those roiling waves. And the people obviously struggle with the elements as well, just to survive. Too much storytelling.
I'm gonna look at this. Oh, I gave this one a different title in my other version. The farmhouse, because these are both farmhouses. And I'm not sure that the house as home quite fits this picture particularly. What is the relationship? Well, if you think about farms, generally speaking, a farmhouse is there to, its relationship with nature involves exploitation of nature, right? You have to be kind of in harmony with nature, but also manipulating nature to get it to give you what you need to eat and so on. And to me, the main thing that feels farmy about this is that weird little wheeled thing over in the field, which seems to be some kind of farm machinery, perhaps that a horse would pull. And then the red house looks like a barn, but clearly it is a house. If you look at that window, you can kind of see the curtains in the window. So it's designed to feel like a house that someone lives in. But if you look at the shapes of the house, does it make sense in 3 dimensions? Or just any? Yeah.
It looks to me like there are 2 children in bed up near the top of the painting under the moon, like they're sleeping outdoors.
Oh,
And then it looks like people
where are they?
right there. There? Mm-hmm. And then that looks like other people outside doing something.
Does that make you, do you see them? Because I was going to say the only person there is a woman, but that's interesting. And maybe it's a commentary on, I mean, to me, that hillside is very, very bleak looking. You have these very tall, deciduous trees, but clearly there are stumps, there are trunks that look like they've been burnt, they're dead, they're desiccated, and then there's these little bitty fir trees around that are so small, even though you'd think evergreens might be larger. Okay.
So I hadn't seen the people, but when you talked about that, I can make out two figures in the hills above the red farmhouse. However, and I think they look really big, but I think that the lack of normal perspective in the rest of the picture justifies them being big. For example, look at the woman. She's way too tall. She's like a story and a half tall. And like you were bringing up, the home is off in perspective. And finally, the moonlight reflecting off the trees is on the wrong side of the trees. Right? So it's like that, which is nice.
Well, to me, this is incredibly austere. And those two objects, I don't know what they are. The people were people, but I sort of thought maybe they were tombstones and thought that they were people who are dead. And it sort of goes along with the trees in the background that look dead as well. I mean, so this is not a happy scene.
Yeah. And one of the, I think it's very, to me, an important part of it is what you mentioned, that the woman who is staring straight at the painter, who apparently is in midair, and is seeing an angle of the house that is very hard to imagine in 3 dimensions. The way the house is built, it's very hard to imagine, like walking up to the front door, what the relationship between those 2 blocks are. And then the door is too small for her to go in, even though she's standing a little farther away from us than the door. It's very creepy. It's like the woman is maybe too big for this landscape. Anne-Marie?
I would like to echo some of that. I think this is a primitive painting, but unlike Grandma Moses or some that Americans are more familiar with, this is not a cheerful vision of what a farm would be. In fact, I think it's very ironic. The title was The House is a Home, right?
Well, I put that up there and then I changed it to the farmhouse.
But what
yeah.
is the title of the?
The title of the work
Is New England Farm. Okay, well, that's fine. And it's done by a woman, which is even better. I think it's an ironic title because, of course, the woman is in the center of the painting. She is facing us, as you said. And it should ground the painting for us, but in the same way, it is I think, an ironic perspective because it's not realistic at all. She's outsized rather. As you said, she doesn't fit into the house. She never could. And in the background, if you're going to make this a painting that is about perhaps the woman as a hero, why is the background so bleak? Actually, the background looks rather like the farmers have strafed it and that it's not prolific. And the only prolific part is the part on the right where the manufactured machinery is, which very much dominates that side of the painting. So you have the bleakness of the background, you have the cultivated garden or crops, and then you have the house, which doesn't fit in any way. In fact, it's misshapen. So I think if it's not critical, it's certainly an ironic painting.
Yeah. Marguerite Zorak was actually a Californian. She was an early graduate of Stanford and had been to Europe. And so this is actually quite a sophisticated painting, but. Okay, Roy, go ahead.
2 comments. Number one, I believe there's another painting by her on exhibit in the Harn right now of a North Florida farm, which is wildly different from this. And the second is that the woman looks to me, my vision is very poor, but her posture and everything looks like a monk woman.
Yeah, I just had a question. I'm struggling to see children up on the hillside. I've looked at this picture many times. I always thought maybe those were tombstones up there. Could somebody, are they beds? Or are those the head? I can't see children. Are they in a bed or?
Oh, sorry, pressed the wrong thing.
Where are the children?
Are they there?
Judy, they're saying to the left.
On the left.
Well. Left.
Come towards you.
Just smart person.
She was like, oh,
I don't, but it's interesting.
I think part of it is not seeing it in real life, and we're seeing a photograph. It's obviously American primitive or naivete paintings. I not only paint American primitive, but I've taught American primitive painting. To me, but doesn't matter. Everybody has their own view. Okay, that's why the house is skewed and so forth. But it's done. I think it's really important to know who painted it and when, in order to look at it. And to me, it's done by a woman. The woman is obviously draws us in. She's the focus, and maybe she's telling us that the woman is what makes the farm go. Notice it's green around the woman and the farmhouse, but not other places. And that's all. I won't go on. I'm not going to lecture.
I agree with that, about that sort of halo of green. What I'm saying is she wasn't a primitive in the sense of being untaught. She was actually a very sophisticated painter, but presenting this in a certain way that suggests something primitive. Yeah.
Having grown up in a rural area, I can attest that many times on farms, there are cemeteries associated with the farms on the hillside. And this woman is draped in black, and I think they're tombstones up there. And you don't know, they may be family members, children, and the farmhouse is disjointed. The whole painting is disjointed except for the woman with the green around her. So I think it's a serious picture of loss.
That's interesting. I think of her as a survivor, and you just really emphasize that.
I also think that the woman has a very ethereal appearance. Is she real? Or is she a woman who's just been swallowed by the hardships of farm life, as so many women were?
I think the men were all at war She's by herself with 6 children that are in the addition, the house addition they put on there. And it's a very bleak picture, and she's wondering if and when the men are coming back.
Let's take a moment. It is 11, and I'm not sure how many more photos there are. If we want to keep going. Ooh, another hour. So I'll leave that to y'all.
There's actually I could keep going for a while. I just wanted to let you see this as a contrast. Another farm with a woman, but such a different feeling. The woman feeding the chickens, the apple tree, the lush grass, the sense of the house as not being this disjointed thing, but as being a place you could definitely walk into and get out of the sun and, or so it seems to me. This is a neighbor, a neighbor of Bellos's, I think, when he was summering in upstate New York. But do you want?
It's your call.
Judy, I think if you're up for it and we have some interested folks, it's okay to go a little bit longer, but maybe at a faster
I'm
pace.
willing to go longer. This is such a great audience and I'm learning a lot.
What do you think, Laura? I'll leave it to you. Okay. Maybe
Okay.
10 more minutes and then we'll see what we can get to.
Deal.
I'm trying to remember what the other pictures are, but I think this does make an interesting contrast to Marguerite Zorach's picture. I forget what else I have. Oh, other direction. I am going backwards. There we go. Another abstract one. I had actually retitled this part to Civic Spaces. Do you see buildings in this picture? Does it feel inhabited? I'll just zip on to clarify. This is a painting that's on exhibit at the museum now by Werner Dreves, who was one of the artists that got out of Germany, I think in 1930 when Hitler rose, because he could see that this was not a place where you could do art. But he became a very well-known and loved teacher. And you can see he lived until 1985. There's even a TV special on him that you can see. But I guess the question is, are there people here and are there buildings here? Is there space here or is it just, I mean, mostly it looks two-dimensional, doesn't it? You have the, everything, almost everything in the picture, you have lines that divide things up and some of them are curved, some of them are straight, and then the colors are applied within the spaces that the lines define. So it's it has a very strong geometrical feel and a feeling that the color and the lines are what's important. The exception being maybe this row of black squares because there are no lines that radiate from them or across them. They're just there. And you might say that about these triangles too. Yes, the title of that painting is Composition After Botticelli. And interestingly, this is a painting in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So he would have seen this. And here we definitely have these public spaces we have these three groups of people set around in front of buildings or in roadways. There's kind of a crossroads in front and a piazza in front of that building on the right. A little scene going on inside that building to the right. But the thing about Botticelli is that he's using this space to give you a temporal progress. Saint Zenobius appears here, the bishop here, and here. So what you have is three separate scenes where the saint is raising a sick woman. I think this guy is dead because his chin has been tied up, so he's raising the dead. And here, he doesn't even have to be present. He just blesses a little water, and his acolyte takes it and arrives and pours it over the woman to cure her. And you can see this row of cypresses that Dreves just basically kind of turned it so it blocks off the end of the street. But even so, it's not really clear what this thing is. You have these things that define the perspective, but in a way, Dreves's picture is almost more rational, but you could see why he tried to make it rational, because Botticelli was trying so hard to make it rational, to give you the perspective and the geometry.
Yeah. Can you show the slide with just that picture on the lower right?
Just the Botticelli?
There. Now, the way it seems, all right, it's like a movie, right? I think you were implying that. And so on the left, where he's raising the dead, okay, that's the figure with a pointed hat, right? And then addressing the man who has died, same figure, right?
Yeah.
Same figure. And then up in the room, same figure, but in the lower right page, in the lower right part of this film strip, he's not there. Instead, there's the person who, in addressing the dead, is behind the key figure. Addressing the dead, the next to the left one.
You were right about suggesting it's like a film strip. What you actually have is a second film strip that just covers this, where the bishop interacts with this young priest or deacon.
Mm-hmm.
He gives him something. The young man is here carrying it, and then here he is pouring it out. And this is a special kind of miracle because he doesn't even have to be there, I think.
And the deacon is missing in the last frame, right?
The bishop is missing, but the deacon is right here.
Oh, that's it. Okay, the bishop.
Guy in white.
That's who has the pointed hat. Okay.
But the guy with the pointed hat doesn't even have to touch or look at the woman in order to
I see.
happen.
Fascinating. Thank you.
I think we'll go ahead and stop. I hate to cut everything short, but as those of you on Zoom, I hope you had the same appreciation for today. And Laura, any final thoughts?
Just many thanks to you. I think people enjoyed it and got very involved with it, so thanks.
So much fun, and I learned a lot, which was what I kind of was hoping for.
And I just want to let you know that next week we'll be looking at something different. We'll be looking at gestures in art. So it's a little different than what we did today. So thanks.
Thank you.